I hate stinger hooks. Very rare for me to use a stinger hook.
Why is that?
Just because a lot of times the fish will come up behind the bait and they'll mouth it real soft, and if they feel that sharpness of the stinger hook, they'll drop it. I mean, there is certain days where you do have to use stingers, but it's a very low percentage of the time, I would say myself. Whoa. Woo! I love it. Look at that. Hey, this sturgeon's a smart sturgeon. You know why?
Why is that?
Why? You ask why?
Huh.
Because you know what? He doesn't have to worry about anybody spearing him up here in the river. You stay up in the river, you're gonna live to be over 100. Yep. Just loving, again, this type of fishing, because you constantly, when you're fishing a river, you constantly have new fish coming into these holes. You can sit here all day. It's really, there's not a timing deal either. Any time of day is good up here, and you don't have to get up at the crack of dawn to come up and fish the river. Here's definitely a better fish right here. There we go. Now I'm loving it. You know, and what they're doing too, you guys, is they're pinning it on the bottom. Definitely pin that one like there. When you're fishing river, you got to think a lot of muddy bottom. So the key is the weight of the jig. It all depends on where you are in the current. Now the key to it is you don't want that jig to go into the bottom and stay in the same place all the time. The whole thing is, it's called long lining, and long lining means that you're working the jig. Right now we're in 12.5 feet of water, so I'm hitting at about 18 foot, so I'm at a 45, and you pump that jig about 5 to 10 times and stop it. Then all of a sudden I constantly have my bail open and I'm working that jig, so pump, nothing. Then what I do is I let out about 10 inches of line, in which allows that jig to slide down current. Now if the jig is too heavy, it's going to stay in one place, it's not going to slide down. The jig is too light, you're never going to feel the bottom. But what happens, I've watched it so many times on the camera, is that the walleyes actually, you're pumping it like this, and they're facing, looking at the jig, but as soon as you let out that line, that 10 inches to a foot of line, and pump it, it slides past them, and that's what really triggers them to bite. Every one of these fish so far that I've hooked up on has hit after I let out the line and pump it once or twice, and bingo. So that is the key, to make sure that you have that jig so it slides down the current, but yet you have to be able to control the jig so it hits the bottom all the time. So that's the key to it right there. That's definitely eating quality. I'm keeping that one. So now look at the color of that
that's
fish.
Really cool.
Look how dark he is. Now that fish is really dark because it's been in the river a long time. You can always tell the fish that come up. They're more like this one right here. Now this fish hasn't been in the river real long, maybe a month. That fish right there has been in the river for at least 3 months.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Definitely a different color.
That's an eater for sure.
Yep, eater for sure. So many of the fish, when you have that much current all fall, right up till freeze up, that's like, I've said this a million times, current is a magnetic force, and what it does is it sucks the fish out of the main part of the system and sucks them up into the top side. So what I'm going to do here, you guys, is I'm opening the mouth of the minnow up, okay, going through the gill plate, right there, through the gill plate, and what I do is, I love these long shanks, and then what I'll do is I'll twist the minnow right through the bottom of his belly, and I get that hook placement way back. Again, so I don't have to use the stinger. Okay, there's the bottom. So, and I'll pump it, maybe 10 times. I got my bail open, as you can see. Okay, nothing. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let out about another 10 inches to a foot of line. I'm gonna pump it real hard a couple times, and then that jig gets swept down farther. So basically what I'm doing is I'm walking the jig down current. And what's going to happen, again, we got our holes drilled at a 45-degree angle, so the line's not rubbing on the ice. So what's going to happen, I'm going to walk it down so far, maybe 30 feet, 40 feet, and then it's not going to go any farther. Then I'm going to basically work it back fast, because you get bit once in a while coming back up river, but it's more so when you're going down. And what happens, like I was saying, is that the walleyes are sitting there looking at it, and they're facing right at it. They're facing the end of the current. And what I do is I lift it up, and I let out some line like that, and I lift it real high, and it gets washed down. Well, that's what gets them excited, because that bait is getting away from them. So they just quick go down river, line back up, and that's when they'll hit it. It's always 90% of the time is on that first couple of pumps when I let more line out and walk that jig downriver. So that's the key. If you're using too heavy of a jig, it's going to go down, it's going to stay in the same spot, and it's not going to slide. You have to be able to walk the jig down current. And if it's too light, it's just going to keep getting swept every time. You're never going to have constant bottom. So again, let more line out, walk it down. The key is too, when you're using, like I'm using my Vexlar here, is I drilled a hole just a little bit down from where I'm fishing because my line is going downstream here. And again, you got to be able to get that transducer so it's pointing in that direction. You don't want the transducer pointing straight down. You want it pointing downstream so I can pick up on where my jig is. And that is the key. It helped us find these fish this morning just by locating. We saw a lot of movement on the Vexlar, and that's how we kind of honed in on the spot. Again, you know, that is the great part about electronics nowadays. I mean, they sure make our lives a lot easier as far as trying to locate the fish. Everything else is obviously up to us to try to figure out the cadence, the color, you know, if they're active fish or non-active fish, if they're what we're actually even trying to target. Cold fronts typically will not affect these fish nearly as much as it does out on the lake right there. Again, we got so much moving water. There's not a lot of pressure on these fish up here, and there is just a ton of fish in this top side of the system right there. You have to be very cautious. You should always have your nebulous with you. You should always have your cell phone in a bag with you. Carry plenty of rope. If something happens that you fall through, you definitely want to have every opportunity to be able to save yourself. So, you know, having a nebulous and having safety lines and just knowing where you're going and fishing with somebody is very important for sure. We want to thank you guys and gals that watch our show each and every week. It's no doubt that we're very proud of you guys and we appreciate everything. And remember, like I always say, it's definitely a great day to be alive.